Hi, this video is going to walk you through the calculating of average of snowfall events for various data sets, as well as removing the mask or masking the data so that we can remove the -999 no data values from the SNODAS data. So to do this, we're going to walk through a submodel model setup using the model builder. The model's already been created. And what I'm going to do with this video basically is go over the file structure, show you how to import new data or an incoming data set of data to the input geodatabase that we'll use, and then run the tool, get the output, which will be the average value that has of 3 or more, as many data sets as you like, with the mask, which means the 999 data is stripped out, and then set up the tool again to run for a second set of data. So what I have here, and we set this up when we met, when we have talked in the lab, we have a calculate average folder here. I have it highlighted, and in here, this is where we're going to do our work. And I think we decided to do this because it allows us to import and export data as needed without having to set up the model a bunch of times or several different times in different subfolders. So as you can see, it's kind of outside of the 2-year events that I have for the fake data that I'm working with. In the 2004-2005, I have 2 lake or lake-to-lake events, 2 folders, and then under lake-to-lake we have the 3 different types of events that I think you guys are working with. Hopefully I've got that correct. So in the SLP folder, you'll see same data set that I've been working through with some other videos, October through December. I've got some different files that I've downloaded just to work with as demonstration here. And what I've done is already processed and masked the data, so the 3 data sets I'm going to use are right here. They've been projected and extracted based on my criteria. And you see I've got another geodatabase here that I've created in this sub-event folder called average value, and I'm going to use this for long-term storage of the calculated average that I'm going to run. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the steps of taking these 3 projected and extracted files. I'm going to strip off this no data that's out over the lakes, and then I'm going to calculate the average with a tool. So the tool we're going to use is set up in this folder called CalcAvgSNODAS. There are a couple of things to look at here. The average geodatabase is empty right now. This is our output. This will be where our average will be calculated to. Our input geodatabase, as I've referred to it before, is our mass data only. So what I'm going to do is move these 3 files, could be as many as I want, into this geodatabase to strip off again the no data and calculate the average. How that's going to happen are with these 2 models. There's a submodel routine, which I'll show you in a second. That does the extraction, or cuts off the -999 value, and it passes it to a main model, which then takes all 3 of my data sets here that I happen to be working with and calculates an average. And I've had them all kind of housed or pointing at this extract MXD. Don't really necessarily have to save an MXD file or project file. I'm just going to do it for simplicity so that it's easier for me to kind of open and close it. So I'm going to put our catalog to the side here, and then I'm going to go ahead and open my project file. And in this project file, I'm going to run the submodel and the model, which will give me an output of an average value for my 3 days of my lake-to-lake event, SLP event, and strip off no data. So to get started, the first thing we want to do is load up the input geodatabase, which I'm calling mass data only. You can actually call it input if you want. Again, we decided to do this because what I'm going to do is process these 3 values for 04, 05, and then move on to 06, 07, some data sets that I've actually downloaded and kind of processed. We're going to go through and I'll show you what it's like. We'll show you the steps of processing one data set and then resetting our CalcAvg tool so it can run again. So to get started, I'm going to highlight my input geodatabase for our model, and it's mass data only. I'm going to right click. I'm going to import raster data sets. This will allow me to import these 3 raster data sets to this geodatabase in one step. Once the tool is open, I'm just going to click and drag these 3 projected files that I've already set up. It's already pointing where I need it to go because, again, I right clicked here and imported to this. So click OK. I'm going to let that tool run. You can see it running down here. And it ran pretty quickly. So now my CalcAvg folder, my input geodatabase, and again this is input because our 2 models here are going to look at this geodatabase as the data we're processing. You can see I've got them all in here, still got the 999 values. And what we're going to do now is put those over here just so I have them as a visual reference so I know what I'm working on, and it kind of keeps me organized a little bit. I won't put the November data on top because there's no data for it. But you can see what we're working with to start. Where they're going to wind up once the average is calculated is in this average geodatabase. This will be our output. So I'm going to run the models. I'm going to open catalog over here in my MXD file. I'm going to navigate to my file folder here that it contains my CalcAvg folder and my toolbox. First thing I want to take a look at is my submodel. I'm going to right click on it and edit it. And I'll just run through this really quickly, make sure we're all set up. And every time you redo this on a new data set, it's probably a good idea to open the submodel, edit, check all of the proper inputs and outputs and tools to make sure that you're on the right track. My iterate rasters, what this is going to do is walk through every raster in a chosen input workspace. Our input workspace is this one here, which is my mass data only. You'll look to make sure that it's actually looking in the right place. So it looks like it's actually in the right folder, CalcAvg mass data only. That's good. Just to kind of walk you through the input workspace, and notice this recycling symbol. That means it's a model parameter. See what our events are. Here's our events. Again, this is just kind of a placeholder or an object, or a declared variable. So if you know a little programming, that's really what this is. Extract by attributes. Double click that. It's looking at the events, and look, it's got all 3. It's seeing that input workspace. It sees that we're iterating through them. That's really what it's doing with these events. And we've said, I only want, what we're doing with this where clause is we only want the pieces of those rasters where their values are greater than or equal to 0. So that'll chop off -9999. The other thing to look at here in extract by attributes is this right here. %name% is a variable. So every one of these events, every one of these files will be temporarily named, will be named this _extract. So this is how ArcGIS is going to handle passing it 3 different files. It's going to use this generic variable. You can see it show up here. We're going to collect those values. Again, we get past it this variable, so we're storing these in what's basically a programming variable. And we'll have our data extracts. Okay, it sees the first one in the series, and it gives that to you as an example. So it looks like our submodel is all set up and ready to go. I'm going to save it, close. Go back over to catalog here in ArcMap, open the main model, right click and edit, and you can see it's looking at the same input workspace. And we've got our extract submodel, so it summarizes that entire submodel into one little function. Get our data extract. You can see the 3 things that are going to come out of that submodel. We're going to calculate cell statistics for all 3 of those. and calculate an average. Make sure this is pointing at the right place. And we'll have it something called an average snowfall for those 3 days. So now that I've checked out both pieces, I've got it pointing at the right input and the right output, this CalcAvg average geodatabase. It's ready to go. Save it, model, I'm going to validate the entire model, and now I'll run the entire model. It shows its progress, it's in the submodel, it's iterating through all the rasters, extracting the data, and calculating statistics. Completed. Click close. Keep it open for a second just to make sure. And you can see over here, if I turn off my 3 inputs, I've stripped off the 999, and now I've calculated an average value between 0 and 9.6 centimeters, I believe. And that's how that model will run. So I can save it, X out of my model. I can remove these inputs and the output actually. Save my project, close it. Now what I'm going to do is come over here, refresh my CalcAvg folder. You'll see I've got the 3 extracted files that iterated through and my average. What I'm going to do now is for long-term storage, because again, this CalcAvg folder is going to get reused as I move on down the line here to 2006, 2007. I'm going to move these files out and put them in long-term storage, quote-unquote, up here in my sub-event folder. How do I do that? Come up here to where I want it to go in my average values. Again, I'm going to store it here so I can clear out this folder so I can reuse it. I'm going to right-click here, import raster datasets. Again, I'm going to drag these up here. It'll be going into my sub-event folder, lake to lake, SLP, average value, GDB for that year. Click OK. It'll walk through all of that and process them. And now we have them in my average value in my sub-event folder for the year of 2004-2005 lake-to-lake event. You can see it's a mirror copy of these two. So now, because I want to move on to 2006-2007, I'm going to clear this all out so I can reset this. So I'm just going to right-click on all these and delete them. Again, what this is doing, resetting the output for my model. Mass data only. Again, I've got copies up here. I don't need these copies anymore. These are just copied here so I could process them in an environment where I don't have to constantly rewrite the entire model, which is basically what we'd have to do if we keep moving the model around. So now we're back to square one. We have our models waiting to go. They're locked because there don't have any data in them. I've got my input, which is mass data only, awaiting a new set of input files, and my average output right here is waiting for further information to be processed. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse 2004-2005, and now I'm going to move on to 2006-2007 and do the process over again. So again, set up the same way, lake to lake. Got an SLP event here in my lake to lake folder for 2006-2007. Pick 3 random days that I'm going to process. I process them down. You can see I've got my 3 projected files here. Obviously it's not really great data because nothing really happened. And then you can see I've already got my long-term quote-unquote average value geodatabase to put that in. Start the process over again. I'm going to open up my extract average MXD file. I'm going to come over here, mass data only, and I'm going to import raster datasets. So I'm going to bring in my raster datasets. Again, I've moved on now to 06-07. I'm going to bring in those 3 files I want to process. Going into the CalcAvg mass data only, and that's our input for our model. So again, we're going to reuse this file structure so that we don't have to constantly rewrite the entire model. So now they're down here for 06. I'm going to drag those in. You can see I don't have a lot of data here. You get the idea. Okay. Now, I'm going to run my tool again. Over to Catalog and ArcMap. Tool, navigate down to my CalcAvg folder. Check out my submodel. Let's make sure it's set up correctly. I'm only should need to do this very quickly. Input workspace. Let's double check. Where's that pointing? CalcAvg, mass data only. Good. It's pointing. So this way, it doesn't matter what you put in to your mass data only geodatabase. The model will see that and process whatever you place in it. Check the events. They look good. It's going to actually do this. It's going to give it the previous name. So extract by attributes, the only thing we have to do here. Make sure it's got the extraction. Okay. Collect values and our data extract. Save it. Okay, I'm going to double check a couple things here. Okay. Now I'm going to go over to my CalcStats model. I'm going to edit that. This is the, make sure it's looking at the right place. CalcAvg, mass data. Yep. Submodel, data extract. Here's where we can change a couple of things. We may want to actually, because it's going to name it 04. It's going to use the temporary file name that it used before. That's fine. We can rename those later. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and just put 2006, just so I know it's a different set of outputs. Save it, model, validate entire model, run entire model. Again, we're going to chunk through. Subroutine is going to chop off the 9999, then it's going to take those extracted values and calculate it. So let's take a look. So I've got my average value, my 9999 is gone. If I come over here to my average, right click and refresh, you can see I've got my values all lined up. So now, again, to close this out, I'll come over to ArcMap, get rid of these inputs and outputs, don't need them anymore, save it, close the project. Come over to my average geodatabase. I'm going to store it long term right here in my sub event folder. Come over here to average value, import raster datasets. Drag those files I want to keep. Again, you can just keep the average, but I tend to want to keep those these intermediate files just in case there's something I need there. And click OK. Those have been moved up here to the average value. Again, I still have the original inputs, so now I can come back down to my CalcAvg folder and just delete or clear out the output. And clear out the inputs. Refresh that folder. You can see there's nothing there. The input's empty, the output's empty, and I have my long-term average value, my average value is stored in my long-term geodatabase, again in my sub-event folder. So that's how I process 2 different years of data. I have an average value now for my lake-to-lake event, and that's how we set up the CalcAvg tool set with its submodel and model using generic input, generic output, and moving the files back to where we need them. That concludes this, and hopefully if you have any questions, please drop me a note. Thanks. Bye.